This is Talk is Sheep, the official podcast of the Wild Sheep Society of BC, brought to you by Sitka Gear. Come along as we bring conversations that matter to you into the high alpine. This episode is sponsored by our conservation partner, Yeti. Thank you, Sitka Gear and Yeti, for investing in healthy wildlife and sustainable ecosystems. Well, Mr. Kyle Kamp, great to see your smiling face again. We're back here in the podcast studio, and for those that have been trailing along on our Talk is Sheep episodes, you're no stranger, and we've sort of made an agreement to do this on a quarterly basis as we approach sheep season, and welcome back to the podcast.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm hoping this is helping folks that are getting ready for any kind of hunt, really, as you kind of split your year into quarters, but it's been fun.
And I like your approach to it, how you've broken it up kind of into 4 parts and just sort of, you've got your off season, then as you approach into, start getting ready, and then you kind of in the heart of it. And then, of course, you go into your hunt itself. So it's been a lot of fun to sort of follow along and sort of the different strategies. But I guess more importantly, how's your training going for your fall? It's not too far out for you either. So.
Yeah, it's good. We, so every year we do something appropriately named called the Death Hike, which tends to fall anywhere between kind of May and that July time frame. This year it's the weekend of July 18th. So my spring is generally the lead up to that, which is great because it sort of is an automatic placeholder to make sure that I'm in line with what I need to be doing for the fall. So it's going good. It can grow to be a lot as time gets closer, as it does for anybody who's training for something specific, but it's just nice to have those little built-in things through the year that kind of force your hand to something that's otherwise maybe not as easy to just start on your own volition. But yeah, we're 6, 7, 8 weeks out, and it's going good so far. What about you? You've got a big hunt coming up.
Yeah, it could be better. I'll say that right now, but getting serious about it for sure, and definitely, getting now that the weather's here and stuff, it makes it a little bit easier to get outside and start throwing the pack on and everything like that. So yeah, looking forward to it, but definitely not where I need to be. That's for sure.
Because yours starts in July, right?
Our season is August 1st, actually, when sheep season starts. I'm not going till September. So
you got some lead up in, so still got some time.
Got a little bit of time to get after it for sure. Now, back to your Death Hike. Is that the one that the EXO boys do? It's Steve and Mark. They kind of lead it, and I've seen it lots on their platform and stuff. Is that the one you're referring to? Yeah, that's the one that we'll do. So every year it's kind of somewhere different, and it's wherever it is and whatever it is enough on paper for you to look at and think, this sounds like a bad idea. And then, I think that's the point of it. They've done such a good job of really making all of us just commit and then figuring it out, which the whole driver behind the Death Hike, and maybe they've shared this before, is just that you sort of, you have this idea in your head. This is true of sheep hunters too, this idea in your head of what you think you're capable of, and generally that ceiling is lower than what it is. You think that you're capable of less than you actually are, and so when you go do these things, it sort of forces your hand to put you into situations that you probably otherwise wouldn't be put in or put yourself in, and it really grows your understanding of what you're capable of. And that's not to say like, oh, we are some sort of a superior group because we do this thing called the Death Hike, because it is even though it is a group, it is a very individual thing. And when we have done post-Death Hike interviews on podcasts, every person that's involved with that walks away with a different takeaway than another person, because it is so individual. But yeah, it's a great thing to do. Done it for a few years, and it's one of those things that I will find a way to make it happen whenever they schedule it, no matter what. It's just that important to me. How far is it?
This year is more about elevation than distance. So there's 6 main peaks in Idaho. The 6 main tallest peaks are kind of strung together by one ridge line in central Idaho. And so the main goal this year is to try to traverse and hit all 6 of those peaks in one attempt. So distance-wise, it's not that impressive. It's actually under 30 miles. But when you factor in elevation and the terrain type, that's what makes it a little bit hairy. So, distance-wise, like I said, it's under 30 miles, but elevation and then traversing between those peaks, requires a little more intricacy and a little more skill than your typical trail. And most of these are all off trail. In fact, I think there's only been a handful that have ever really merged at all with any kind of a trail. We've done the Grand Canyon rim to rim to rim a couple of times. In fact, one of them was an attempt at doing that twice. So one attempt across and back is 20,000 feet and 50 miles. And so we were trying to do 2 of those back to back. A couple of guys finished that, and some other guys wound up at, distance of 70 to 90 miles and 30 some odd thousand feet of climbing over those 48 hours. And it's one of those things in the middle of it, you're thinking, what was I thinking? And then you finish and think, I can't wait to go back. So it's a great thing to be a part of.
Sounds like your classic sheep hunt, right? So,
yeah, exactly. Yep.
Yeah. Just can't wait to get off the mountain, and then the second you do, you're like, it was so much fun. I can't wait to do it again.
Yep, exactly.
A little bit of insanity there for sure. So, yeah, awesome. Well, that's really exciting. How much does that time of year affect things? Obviously June, I guess you're at high elevation, so the temperatures aren't super critical like maybe a lower elevation March.
Yeah, well, you would think that, but the snow melt up there because it is in the mountains. It doesn't really start to really melt off until midsummer or later, and sometimes you may not even get all of it off. So that was a thing that we ran into a couple of years ago in doing this. Was there was still some snow up high in June that made parts of this really challenging to get through and to get across. The other factor, as you can probably imagine, is there's no water up there, especially if the snow is fairly limited. It is a very rocky, alpine-y, no tree line, no anything up there. So if our attempt is to stay high, you have to, sort of develop some sort of a game plan for water. So the hope is that there will be some snow up high that you could melt. And then, that's the other sort of interesting part about it is it's not as it lays out on paper. So you got all these factors that we just talked about, but then afternoon thunderstorms in the mountains, being that high, top of the peak, 12.6 or whatever, and a thunderstorm rolls through, that's not a place that you want to be. So trying to factor in that if something does roll in, how are you going to deal with that? And so there's just a variety of different things that come into it that you've got to think of. But again, if you do that in this, then whenever it comes time for a hunt and you see, like a great example would be if you're looking at Onyx and there's a place you'd really like to go and you look at that map on Onyx and it says, oh, wow, that's 10 miles back and, you got about 5,000 vertical feet. Years ago, I would have looked at that and said, that's for somebody else, or that's a pack-in type of a trip. That's, taking in some stock or something's got to get me in there because I'm not doing that. But after you do several trips like this and you think, oh, well, geez, a couple of years ago, we did 70 miles and 30,000 feet in, 48 hours or whatever. It's not to say you look at 10 miles and 5,000 feet and think it will be easy. You just know you can do it. Right. And then at that point, it's just in your mind becomes a question, not of if you can do it and whether or not to do it. It's just a matter of planning. How much time do I think it'll take me to get back there and to get out? How much time do I have to hunt? How many days does that leave me to hunt once I'm in there? And then you can start to put together a plan. But it's nice because it really opens up opportunities that you otherwise hadn't previously looked at. And I think that that's as much as a factor of you're just building trust in yourself. It's not like, again, you got to be some immense physical specimen. It's just confidence and trust in yourself that you can get back there. It's not a race. It's not, nobody's timing you. Just go slow, steady, cruise at your own speed. And if it's something you're really interested in and you feel like you can confidently pack something out of in an ethical way, go hunt it. You'll probably be the only one there.
Yeah, which is definitely the huge benefit of getting further back, right, is getting away from the masses. So.
Yeah, absolutely.
When you guys are doing these death hikes, do you have a buddy system, or how does that work? You end up just you get gear in reach and you get in trouble, you bail, or how does that work?
Yeah, so over the years we've there has been times where there's a buddy system and like you almost have a partner. But what inevitably happens is there's groups that range in speed, right? Some guys go really fast, some guys are in the middle, some guys are in, kind of the last group. And so regardless of who you're partnered with, you almost inevitably fall together in line with one of those groups. And it might be a collection of, only 3 or 4 of you, and it might be a collection of 8 of you. And, but I think that, your thinking is right in that you can certainly find yourself this year being a great example of that in a real pinch. And, it's good. It's safe. You need to have somebody there. So if you get stuck, if you get injured and you're on the top of one of these things, someone knows and can either get help or can help you. But to answer kind of the second part of your question, yeah, we pretty much everyone has an in-reach, and we all have each other's in-reaches, so we can communicate back and forth if we need to. A couple of years ago, we were on one of these, and it got pretty gnarly pretty quick. And so that year, I had actually hurt my knees doing some training leading into that hike about 2 weeks before we were supposed to go. So I volunteered to do some of the camp stuff and then run a bailout rig for guys that needed to get out. And I thought I was going to go to this, local town and drink coffee, catch up on some work. It was 10 a.m. and that my inReach didn't stop ringing all night. I was getting messages at 2 and just trying to get guys off of a pretty, actually this same stretch that we're going to. So it'll be interesting to see now that we've seen it once, if we handle it any different this time, or how each person handles it different this time, and how far each of us goes.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's great. Well, let's kick off some nutrition stuff. So like we discussed, we're 3 months out from the opener, 2.5 really, I guess, June, July, August. Yeah, it's close for a bunch of people. And I know a lot of people are sort of getting mountain ready. And, you mentioned the email to me, like the dust has worn off your New Year's resolution. So we're firmly into the long strokes of the game here. So as we transition to sort of, mid to late spring and sort of the hunt's not too far off, what are we thinking about, and how does your training progress and your nutrition progress at this point?
Yep, that's a good question. So generally the questions that we get wrapped around how your nutrition changes as your training grows is around the training, right? And so it probably makes sense, although some people don't necessarily think of it like this, that as you get closer and closer to a hunt, if you're running a good training program, that training program should get more and more difficult. The challenge should increase. Otherwise, you eventually hit a specific point. You never grow beyond that. So you want a training plan that is having small adjustments that challenge you a little bit from the point that you begin the plan until the point right before you get ready to go on the hunt. Now, people may not think about this, but it makes sense that if you are asking more demand on the muscle, that's going to come at the cost of something. The currency that it's coming at, the price you're paying, is your calories, your fuel. Something's going to have to fuel that increase in training volume. So your nutrition needs to go up as well if you want to make the most out of that training. Now, kind of the second question that folks will often ask is, okay, well, how much does it need to increase by? And is there a specific thing that I should add on to allow that increase to happen? The how much question varies person to person, but I think a safe rule is 5 to 10%. Now, this goes back to our first podcast where I highly encouraged and highly recommended people do some tracking of their nutrition. Because for me to say, okay, well, either in two scenarios. One, if you're not seeing the end outcome that you want from your training or your weight leading into your hunt, who knows why if we don't have an audit of those actual numbers. But number two, if your training volume is growing and you hear me say that your nutrition needs to grow linearly with that training volume, and I say, to the degree of 5 to 10%, if you don't have that data, you're going to say 5 to 10% of what? I mean, what does that mean? Is that 100? Is that 200 calories? Is that 500? And you really won't know that unless you know kind of where you've been. Now, the other thing to consider is where that comes from. So all of our calories are coming from carbohydrates, proteins, and fats. And the quick button that most people want to press when their training volume grows is protein. Oh, I need more protein if I'm training more. Not really. In fact, if you've hit that saturation point that we talked about in the first episode, if you hit that number that flips on the switch to allow the muscle to rebuild, we don't have reason to believe that pouring that electricity into that outlet even more is going to now make it better. It's on. I mean, the light's on, right? So in reality, because the muscle is predominantly using carbohydrate to fire in activity, you want to try to increase some of that intake from carbohydrate. Now, for a guy who's eaten 2,000 calories, and you hear me say 5 to 10% increase, that is 100 to 200 calories. That's literally adding an apple on per day or a banana. So we're not talking about going to the local Dairy Queen and, eating multiple dilly bars plus French fries and trying to, quote unquote, fuel this increased need. The 5 to 10% in all practicality is very little. That carbohydrate increase comes out to be very minimal. An extra scoop of rice, an extra piece of fruit, an extra, right? So that's an important thing because we live in a culture that is, for some good reasons, some not good reasons, somewhat carb phobic, right? They hear, carbohydrates are bad. So when they hear me say, you need to increase your carbs, they think, this guy is trying to induce diabetes in us all. No, I'm not. It's always the dose that makes the poison. So you have to understand that. And again, that's why I'm such an advocate of tracking is 5 to 10% of what? Where have you been? What does that mean in practicality? And tracking really answers all of that.
Kyle, we talk about this balance of carbs versus fat versus protein. Somebody that's maybe trying to get mountain ready, they're trying to burn fat, but maybe they're struggling on the energy side. Is that always a function of carbs, the balance of carbs? So if somebody's really struggling, they're like, okay, I'm out there, but I just don't have energy. I start a workout, I just can't finish it. I go hike and I'm done. Is what you're eating the biggest factor in your performance?
It's either in what you're eating or in the fact that you have bought into the lie that training and just abusing yourself in training prepares you better. That's not true. So if you're eating sufficiently, but you're following a training program that constantly leaves you fatigued and drained and isn't progressively improving you, that would leave you feeling like that too. Now, let's say that we've isolated it down and we think that it's nutrition. Then you have a couple of factors to look at. Either number one, you're trying to be too aggressive with the overall calorie deficit. In other words, you're simply not eating enough of any nutrient, much less worrying about which nutrient it is. The second factor could be that you are in an appropriate calorie deficit to move your weight, but you've done so by eliminating or reducing carbohydrate intake too much. If you do that, you will feel okay, but you will feel either a consistent fatigue or the inability to execute a workout to the degree to which you are satisfied, that you want, that you feel proud of, that you feel like you're improving it in. And or if you're training for sheep hunting and you're putting in long hours with the pack, let's say that you're doing, progressively increasing to 2 and 3 hours under a pack, just moving, trying to get ready for this, but you're not eating during that workout because you're trying to use it as a way to lose weight, your daily calories could be fine, but your inability to, or your resistance to eat during the middle of that workout would leave you feeling fatigued in the middle of it. And we have a phrase that we use. We simply say totals and timing. If your training session is going over 60 to 90 minutes, you should be eating in the middle of that workout. You need to be eating enough, that's your totals, and you need to be eating with enough frequency, that's your timing, to make a difference. If those two things aren't happening, you will inevitably feel what we call the wall, right? You make some progression and then you just hit this point in the middle of this workout to where it's like, you would love to go faster, you would love to go harder, you would love to go higher, but it is not there. And what I find is that most people are trying to use those workouts to help them lose weight, which is fine, but it is inevitably making sure or putting you in a place where you are unable to train or improve in your training because you don't have any fuel.
Okay. When we start looking at weight management, so, like guys are trying to get leaner and get rid of that winter fat, especially now that they're getting out in the mountains, talk a little bit about that progression in terms of, somebody's like, they're doing the math. They're like, okay, I've got this target weight that I have for, and it's, there's the guys that are trying to bulk, of course, that are trying to put on muscle, but there's the guys that are also trying to lose body fat, get more fit and ready for the mountains. So we'll talk about the latter one. That's probably more applicable to a guy like myself. And, obviously there's the exercise component, but then, what's, do you focus on starving yourself? Is meal selection or the type of food you're eating the most important part? But a person that's putting the work in and they're not getting the results they want, what are kind of the biggest mistakes that is being made in trying to shed that weight for that upcoming hunt?
If they feel like they're putting the work in, but they're not seeing the results, there's a couple of potential things happening. Number one, you're not in a deficit. And that could either be because you're not being honest with yourself and what's being reflected in the tracker is not really it. And you kind of, I had a couple of extra things that didn't actually make it in there. Well, that would be why you're not seeing any progress. Or number two, it could be happening through unintentionally, meaning you may be doing the work by logging your nutrition and you feel like it's accurate, but for some reason there is a discrepancy there from what you are tracking and what's actually coming in. A great example of this would be someone who's in sales and travels a lot and they have to eat out a lot with clients. They may be putting in there a hamburger and French fries, but there's a massive difference between a hamburger and French fries, with a 10-ounce patty at your local steak place and a 2-ounce patty at McDonald's, and the large that they give you at McDonald's and the, handful of steak fries that they give you at this local steakhouse. But so if you're plugging in generic things and you're trying to do the work, but it's not accurately represented in there, that could be a hiccup or a hindrance. And the third thing could be if you are trying to make quick work of this and you're really aggressive with the deficit, you're swinging on big extremes, trying to do really extreme things to get this weight off in a very limited amount of time, it will inevitably drive your hunger hormone through the roof. And that means you will do really good for 4 or 5 days. But the 5th day, your hunger hormone is so aggressive, you just go nuts. You eat everything in the kitchen that you could possibly find because you've been doing so good and you deserve an reward. That's what we tell ourselves anyway, right? That day can actually increase the 4 prior days where you did good. The net of those 5 days. So if you have 4 days that are great, 1 day that is huge, you really wind up with a fairly unchanged intake because that one huge day essentially adds little bits onto those really well-controlled days. And so there's a variety of reasons why you don't want to shift to extremes in this, to make sure that you're just consistent. And if you're consistent, you will see that progress begin to happen.
So the cheat day is not legit. Like anyone that says you got to let yourself go, whatever, you got to have that one day. So when we're saying let yourself go, it's the 10% or the 15%. It's not the 30% or the 50% more calories type day.
Yeah. So if the cheat day, the quote unquote cheat day, can be effective if it is controlled. In other words, you're not going up by thousands of calories. You may be just, you're still monitoring, you're still paying attention. And rather than being at 2,000, you're at like 2,250, 23. It's still very controlled. And or if by having that, it helps your compliance on the other 6 days, knowing you get a little more liberty on Sunday, not crazy, but a little more liberty, and that helps you adhere to the other 6 days, it can be an effective psychological strategy just to drive compliance. But if you take, and this is where it often goes south, people really do great Monday through Thursday. The weekend comes, and as a reward for doing so great Monday through Thursday, they spend Friday, Saturday, Sunday kind of doing whatever. And that may or may not be just a complete deviance from their plan, just totally off base of what they're normally doing. Or just not paying as much attention, right? They're not tracking. So yeah, I'll take another handful of chips, and I grabbed the leftovers off of the kid's plate rather than throw them away because who am I to waste food? Those things add up. And if those things add up to enough of a net intake in 7 days that puts your calorie intake where it is at maintenance, not a loss, but at maintenance, you will feel as if you've been doing the work that should be rewarded by the weight coming down, but you will see no weight coming down. And that is not because your 4 days that you felt looked good are wrong. It's because those 3 days were so high that the net intake basically produced nothing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. Good stuff. So now as we're starting to approach the season, like we said, we're literally, May 19th. So in 2 months, the Yukoners or Territory, I think it's the Northwest Territories, they're in the mountains. July 15th is their first hunt. So 2 months away. How do we manage that ramp up to the season in terms of overtraining? Knowing that you're transitioning from, the home diet, and then you're going to be eating a mountain diet. And, I don't know if we'll talk before the season opens, but how does someone, what are they thinking the last couple of weeks before they go off on their hunt? What should they be thinking about? And then even just like the sort of, as they approach, the week before the marathon effectively, is there some sort of maintenance? Is it a quiet week? Do they go hard? Talk a little bit about that sort of progression.
Yeah, so from the training progression side of things, there's a general rule in the community that suggests you don't ever really want to increase your load by 10% or more from the prior week. That could be the amount of weight in your pack. That could be the number of minutes that you're investing, and you often want to do minutes, not miles, because the varying terrain can depend on, how much of an increase that is. But you really don't, to avoid overtraining, you kind of want to keep it at that 10% rule. A couple weeks prior to the actual hunt itself, you want to begin what we call the taper. And that's where you're not sitting on a couch, but you're slowly pulling back from what we hope was timed to be just this maximum volume, right? So you kind of want to taper, you kind of want to increase, and you want to time it right to where about 2 weeks to 10 days before the event itself, you hit like the maximum amount of training that you have scheduled over the last 12, 16, 20 weeks. In the 10 to 14 days before the event, you want to scale that back by 30%, 50%, give the muscles the opportunity, the time to rest and recover and be fully ready to go whenever you go on the actual hunt itself. Mistake people make on the nutrition side during this time is they think they need to increase their intake and carb load. And you don't really. You need to maintain your normal intake, but that scaling back of the expenditure, that scaling back of the training with normal intake will mean better recovery because the volume's less, right? So it's like if I continue to put gas in my car, but I'm not driving as much, eventually that tank gets full. It's not emptying. And it's the same kind of premise here. Now, one thing that I would say with this 10% rule, because some people will fear that they won't be able to hit this quote max volume. What I've found over the years of even training for this death hike is, I have a job that's fairly demanding. I have a wife that I care a lot about. I have 2 boys, one on the way that I care a lot about. And I also have other hobbies as well. It would be very difficult for me with all of those things to invest the quote right amount of training to train for these death hikes. I would almost need to be a full-time paid athlete to do that. And so the rule that I've given myself and the promise I've made to myself over the years is I'm going to base this 10% rule, and I'm going to get as far as I can in the given amount of time and trust that that was enough. Sometimes it's not about being in the perfect condition as it is a better condition than you were usually in. And then you just go. So in the number of years that I've done this and I've trained max volumes, and then I've transitioned to this more of like, here's the amount of time that I've got to commit and I'm going to get as far as I can, whether it's the quote max or not. In both of those scenarios, I've never found where it didn't suck. It always reaches a point where it is just miserable and it sucks and it's a game between the ears, and there's no amount of training that ever gets you beyond that point. So, you may as well wrap your mind around the idea of I'm going to make the most of the opportunity and the time that I've got and trust that that was better than I was previously. And I say that because when you begin to allow someone to change their mindset around like that, it all of a sudden feels doable to them, right? They feel encouraged and motivated versus there's no way I'm ever going to be able to get that amount in. I'm just going to get smoked on this hunt. And if you go in like that, you're done before you ever go in. You have to just be confident that you've invested the time and the energy, and that where you are is as far as you could get with the time and the life that you had, right? And I think that's an important element. So, yeah, you keep your nutrition the same. 10% increases leading into the season. A couple of weeks before the season begins, you begin to scale back the training to allow the muscles to fully and completely recover prior to going in for the hunt itself.
Awesome. Let's talk a little bit as we transition now, certainly for us in the northern climates here, to these hotter temperatures and these hot days and throwing the pack on and getting out. Sort of electrolyte management and how to deal with these really hot conditions. Obviously, it's front of mind with you on that death hike. So what do we have to start thinking about there, where we start, and then on top of it for the hunt, like what are some of the primary drivers that you're thinking about when you go on a hunt? What are you carrying for electrolytes and sort of managing that recovery aspect?
So the first thing is you need to determine if you're even a person who needs them. The second part is that we will put people in a couple of categories here. Really salty sweaters, medium salty sweaters, not salty sweaters. The amount of electrolyte that you need would be based upon you personally and where you fall in that category. If you buy a product that has a lot of salt in it and you're a guy who falls in the is not a salty sweater category, and you're trying to pile a bunch of salt in, you're going to end up nauseous and not feeling good. On the flip side, if you're the person who's losing a lot of salt, but you're buying a product that has very little sodium replacement in it, it doesn't matter what you do, you're never going to feel good because you're not replacing the thing that you need. So you need to kind of determine where you fall in that mix. And a very easy way to do that is while you're doing these training sessions, as the temperatures start to increase, do you notice that you have a salt stain around the brim of your hat? Do you have salt around your shirt where your pack sits because you tend to sweat in that area the most? That's a good indication that you're losing a fair amount of sodium during training, and you need to find a replacement that has a higher sodium amount. We'll talk about what those are in a minute. If you don't find that, or you don't even find that you sweat much, you don't necessarily need to buy into or believe that you need these big, immense, massive amounts of sodium replacements. Now, there's a variety of products available now. It used to be Gatorade, and that was about it. But now there are just, innumerable amounts of products. So you have what I would call the not even on the register group of products, meaning they have a lot of fluff in them and almost no electrolytes. And some of these products are often marketed towards the outdoor industry. They have no fuel, they have very little electrolytes, and a lot of stuff in there that really is not showing much benefit when it comes to this. I wouldn't purchase those, regardless of what category you fall into.
Can you throw some names out, or do you not want to throw anyone under the bus?
I'm not going to throw anyone under the bus. If you
Who are the
look
good ones,
at,
then?
let me say this. If you look at the back of a nutrition label and you do not see the sodium content of at least 200 to 300 milligrams, I would say there's basically no salt in that. And if you see very little potassium, if you see very little magnesium, if you see very little of that, and you see a bunch of vitamin B12 and vitamin B6, it's 1,000% of your daily needs, and it has very little calories, that is basically a flavor enhancer of water. That's it.
Okay.
Right? So you can take that as your guide, and I will save... I'll save myself some trouble.
Fair enough.
Then I would go into the category of low salty sweaters. This would be like your Gatorade. So your standard Gatorade mix that comes in the orange tub that you gave your kids before T-ball, or they gave to them at the practice. That's got a little bit of electrolytes in it, but it does have some fuel too. Carbohydrates is fuel. So I do love most of these products for the fact that you're killing two birds with one stone. You're getting fuel while you're moving, and you're getting some electrolyte replacement if you need it. It's a flavor enhancer, so you're probably going to be drinking more liquid than if you didn't have it too. So there is some value in some of these. Then you've got the kind of the mid-tier, and this is products that have a sodium content of roughly 300 milligrams per serving, clear up to 500 milligrams per serving. This would be like Liquid IV, Tailwind, Scratch Labs, some of the more popular products that fall into the ultra running community tend to fall in that category. And then you've got on the upper end would be like your Element, which has 1,000 milligrams of sodium per serving. Now, too much sodium in one hit can cause people to have stomach issues. So that's why I don't love the either end of the spectrum. I don't care about a product that has no electrolytes in it, so I don't care about that end of the spectrum. I don't have much interest in trying something that has the potential to aggravate my stomach because of such a large hit at one time. I like to find something in the middle, that like 300 to 500 milligram per serving category, and the good news is that there's a lot of products in that category. From there, what you choose, not going to tell you there's one more superior than another. I think you buy a couple of sample packs, you try them all, you find the one that you think that you're going to be most likely to drink, because it doesn't matter what's in that pack if you can't get it down, and you find the one that sits the best with you, and then you buy it without wondering or being worried that you made the wrong choice. You didn't. If it sits well with you and you enjoy it, that means you're going to get it in, and that's a good choice.
So in terms of consumption on your hunt, or even in your training, I guess like in your training, it's pretty much a no-brainer that, when you go for a hike, you get thirsty, you drink your electrolytes. But or is it something you do post training? And likewise, something like that, is it something that you should be drinking first thing in the morning, during the day, on your hike, when you're consuming your water, at the end of the day when you get back to camp for recovery? When's the best time for consumption, or does it even matter?
Yeah, all things with nutrition. So this is true of electrolytes, which you're asking about. This is true of water, liquid as a whole. This is true of calories. This is true of all macronutrients. The more that you can provide regular doses throughout the entirety of the day, the better you're going to do and feel. because we are not a closed system. A car is a closed system. You can put antifreeze and oil in, and unless you've got a leak somewhere, that is most of the same amount of those things are going to be left in there until you go to change them. We are different in the sense of we have a constant drain, and then we are required then to intake something to replace what we're draining, whether that's electrolytes, water, fuel, etc. So if you're going long periods of time without any of those things, at some point your muscle, your cells, your body is going to tap in. It's going to go tap into the resource, and there's nobody home, right? And if there's nobody home, you will suffer the consequences of not having any of that nutrient, that thing there at the time. For protein, that means you'll suffer the consequences of repair. For carbohydrates, that means you'll suffer the consequences of energy. For hydration, that means you'll suffer the consequences of being dehydrated. For electrolytes, that means you'll suffer the consequences of cramps, right? So I recognize, being a hunter myself, that it's not always opportune to get it in all the time. Like, what if there's no water? But to the best of your ability, take advantage of it when you have. I remember hiking into, we had a very long hike into my sheep hunt several years ago in Alaska, and there was water available most places, but there were stretches where there weren't. And so when they were down low, we would take as much in as we wanted to. We're not overdoing it to the point of feeling gross and throwing up, but taking in as much as we could then, filling our bladder and moving on, right? And so in that situation, it's like we hadn't drank for a while. Instead of being in a rush, let's take 20, 30 minutes, sit here, have a snack, drink as much as we want, fill our bladders, and then know that that's going to get us to the next point. And it did. So I understand that things are not always going to be ideal and optimal, but do your best to try to make it practical. When you get the opportunity, take advantage of it, and don't think like, oh, there'll be more later, or I don't really feel like getting the bottle out of the pack, so I'm just not going to worry about it. It will catch up with you, and that is a key to staying strong on long hunts. If you want to feel as good as you did on day 5, 7, and 10 as you did on day 1, you have to stay on top of these things. You can't let days slip by, because days accumulate, and if you get behind, you're not only trying to make up from the last 3 days, but you're also trying to make up for today. And when you get that far behind, it's tough to ever pull out of.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, at a hunt where one of our buddies got medevaced out, that's exactly what happened. It was cumulative, and it was, whatever. You can always go one day, but it was multiple days of not enough hydration, and then he got run down, and it just hit the wall, and it was all over. So, yeah. And they flew him out. He went to the hospital, got electrolytes, and for 2 days, it took the helicopter a day to get in there. Basically, sort of realized mid-afternoon he was in trouble. By the time we, radioed for help, it was evening. So the helicopter gets in the next day, and we had him by a fire inside a cabin, like trying to get his internal temperature up, and there's just nothing, like hydrating, the whole works. So he gets to the hospital, gets on IV, and like half an hour after he's on the IV, he's fine. Just that quick. But it was crazy. It was exactly what you said. And he was a new hunter. He was hunting with us, and he had, we talk about that, about having your Nalgene. With your Nalgene, you always know how much you drink, right? If you've got a Camelback, you have no idea what you're drinking, or at least nobody around you does. So he was sucking on the stupid little Camelback and consuming basically nothing for 3 days. And then I think it took about 5 or 6 days, and then it was over. So it was scary. So
people will ask, how much water should I have? And we have a bunch of really silly, impractical calculations that you can give people. But to be honest, when it comes to being like a hunter, you're already managing so much about just trying to get through the day, that to then sit here and try to micromanage your water intake, I think is a challenge. So, if not impossible and impractical. So what we'll often do is say, have each person set for themselves a daily limitation, meaning like take morning, for example. By the time I wake up until the time at 11 o'clock or so rolls around, I want to be through an entire Nalgene, and I want to do another one of those between 11 a.m. and 5 or 6 p.m., and then I want to have one at camp, right? So I am trying to set limitations for myself or benchmarks for myself to make sure that I'm getting enough, rather than saying, I mean, the typical recommendation could be anywhere between 0.4 to zero point 0.8 liters per hour while moving. It's like, well, geez Louise, how are you going to manage? Like, how could you ever have someone manage that? You couldn't. So just instead, setting benchmarks for yourself to hit to make sure you're getting enough, monitoring the color of your pee to determine if that was enough, right? So if you're really dark yellow, it wasn't enough. You need to figure out how to get more in there. If you're peeing relatively clear, kind of straw yellow, you're probably sufficient. So just making sure that you're getting enough through an easy, weightless barometer, like the color of your pee, is a good, a very good benchmark to give yourself to see if you're behind or if you need more.
Can you drink too much? Like, is there an issue where you're like, and then you've reduced the amount of electrolytes and every, like you peed out everything? Is there too much water?
Absolutely. Yeah, okay, you absolutely could drink too much. I mean, it's very low likelihood that your average hunter is going to do that because of no other reason than availability, right? I mean, water is not everywhere. But certainly when you're training, and that's like even talking about our sheep hunt where we would fill up when we got the opportunity. If you're not careful, you can get like what we call sloshy gut, meaning you drink so much that you think you're, like you're a camel and you can put it into reserves. You don't. Yeah. You end up with what is literally sloshy gut, right? So you walk and you sort of feel like you've got all this water in here, and it doesn't feel good. And so over time, kidneys increase, heart rate increases, so the kidneys volume can increase so that you can pee some of this off so you can get back to a normal level. So where some is good, more is not always better.
Mm. Yeah, absolutely. How are we for time? I know you got another appointment coming up. You got to get going?
Yeah, we got a little bit.
Okay. One last thing. So packing for the hunt, and you've done all this nutrition, you've done all this training, and now you're going to go on the mountain. So what are your clients? What are you telling them for, they're packing for 10 days, 12 days, 14 days, and a true backpack hunt, and not something that the outfitter's feeding you. You're on your own. What are you thinking about, and what are you sort of, and then you're used to, you're working out, you're doing your regular stuff and burning, fair amount of calories, mm-hmm. but you're not on the mountain burning 10,000 or 7,000 calories. So how do you manage that for this calorie deficiency you're going to experience for 2 weeks straight?
We try to get an idea of what is going to be the expectation of the hunt. What's the mileage in? What's the type of terrain? Should I expect a lot of elevation, fairly minimal elevation? And when you know that, you can rank things on low, medium, and hard. And when you rank things on that, we basically say that low is anything 5 miles or less and less than 1,000 feet. Moderate is anything that is 5 to 10 miles and between 1,000 and 3,500, 4,000 feet. Difficult is anything greater than 10 miles and 4,000 to 5,000 feet of climbing plus per day. And when you know that, you can take a multiplier by your body weight and determine your daily needs. And so those daily needs for the low intensity are somewhere between 16 and 18 calories per pound. Moderate would be 19 to 20, and hard would be 21. Now, those are starting places, right? And so I would encourage people to use those ranges as a starting point based on what you're anticipating for your hunt, and then modifying from there. It could look different. Your hike in could be very hard, and it could be very low intensity once you're in there. And then the time out could be low. So you could have 2 days. You could have the day in and the day that you pack out as hard, high-calorie days, and your food bag planned accordingly. And then in the middle, you have 5 relatively low days. I mean, sometimes when you move in, after you put all those miles in elevation to get in there, it's fairly easy topography, and you may be glassing for a couple days and not moving a whole lot. You don't need all this extra fuel. But we have a calculator on the website that can help people kind of set some of that up if they're interested.
Awesome, man. Lots of great stuff there. So Yeah, unlikely we're going to certainly talk in the next 6 weeks before the first people start hitting the mountains. What are we missing? Anything else we haven't scratched the surface on that we need to touch before they get out there?
No, I would say, for those folks that are going to be getting out first in the next 6 weeks, plan your training accordingly and trust that you've done enough if you've been doing the work. Make sure that when you're out there, you're staying on top of those 4 main things: your fuel and your calories, the different macros that are broken up among those, the hydration and the electrolytes if you need them. If you stay on top of those each day, you check those 4 boxes, you will feel as good on day 5, day 7, day 10 as you did on day 1. If you fall behind, though, for one reason, it's going to be really challenging, to make that up. So, yeah, if anybody's got any questions over the next 6 weeks, they're welcome to reach out to me. I'd be happy to help, or 8 weeks or 12 weeks or whatever until your hunt actually is there. But no, I think we've covered a lot of great things over the last couple weeks, and I know we've got a couple more planned through the rest of the year to talk about postseason and stuff. But absolutely, if anyone has questions, I'd be glad to help.
Awesome, Kyle. Well, thanks so much. Appreciate it. And so maybe when you get back from your death, I call it death march, but it's not what it's called. It's death hike, isn't it?
They're interchangeable. Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. Love to hear more about it and wish you well. Yeah. And I always love watching. Obviously subscribe to EXO Mountain Gear's channel there and always get the updates. It's pretty cool to see. So how many people average go? Like, how many people are on that?
It varies anywhere from, I remember one year it was 13, and I remember one year we did a big cross-country loop through, wasn't a loop, but a big cross-country death hike through Alaska, and we had 27. So it kind of varies. This year is actually a fairly big group, so it'll be interesting to, we all commit early on, but it's inevitable that sometimes family stuff gets put on the calendar and that number goes down because of those obligations. But usually you start knowing who that's going to be by this time of year, and right now it's a pretty big group still.
Awesome, man. Well, hey, have a great time and appreciate your time. And thanks again. Look forward to catching up in Q3. So appreciate you, man.
Kyle. Thank you. Thanks for having me.